title of this session is Change the Media, Change the World. And when I was typing up the PowerPoint, I actually mistyped it, and I capitalized E, change me, and then I went, oh wow, because that really is what the story is about. It's about how God changed me and ultimately has been showing me, bringing me to a place where I can help change the media, and of course, that's what we really want to do ultimately, is change the world. So, the influence of culture. You know, the Missions Conference is all about various international cultures. They're everywhere, and one thing that is ubiquitous everywhere is cell phones. I was at a conference in Washington, D.C. I was actually at the National Prayer Breakfast this last, in February, and everybody we spoke to, they said it doesn't matter if it's a third world country, it doesn't matter if they don't have water, if they don't have a place to live, they've got cell phones. And not just cell phones, smartphones. So I think it's just interesting to note that culture, and that includes our culture from the United States, is actually being exported to the entire world. So I, like everybody else, just like you all, I am a product of my own culture, right? So my story, I am a boomer, a baby boomer. I grew up in the 50s. I'm the post-war generation. My mother was a Southern belle. My father was a war hero. And this is one of my favorite pictures of my dad lifting me up. This was before he left for Korea. So during this time, my parents were, the things they cared about the most was they had come out of the Depression era, they didn't have anything. And they wanted to give their family everything they didn't have. They wanted peace and prosperity. So my father was a big influence in my life because he was a college professor. In addition to having been a Marine colonel, he was a college professor, and so books were really, really important. Greek and Roman myths and fairy tales and the Oz books and Alice in Wonderland. I mean, he read to us as children every night. And, you know, there are 24 Oz books, maybe more than that. I know most people think of just one Oz book. There's 24 of them. So I kind of grew up in a world where imagination, like listening to my dad read and imagining it all happening was part of it. One of my favorite stories as a kid was called The Story of the Live Dolls. And it was about these dolls that came to life one day. Like everybody's dolls came to life, and so it was really embarrassing for girls that had left their dolls lying around naked and stuff like that. And that story just panicked me. It panicked me. And I felt like I had to treat all my dolls equally well from then on, in case a day came. Something else we did as kids, my dad actually was a professor at Utah State University. We lived in Utah, and we traveled, you know, on weekends, and we camped, and we went to the Grand Canyon, and we Arches and Bryce Canyon and Yellowstone, and we were just there all the time, and we would camp out under the stars. We didn't sleep in tents, we slept under the stars. And I learned a lot of my Greek myths from my father, pointing out the constellations and telling us the Greek myths based on the constellations. It was an incredibly magical, wonderful childhood. Christmas was very special. In fact, amazingly, every Christmas Eve when we went to bed, all of the stuffed animals and dolls in the house came to life, formed a line from our bedroom all the way down the stairs, up to and around the Christmas tree. So when we got up, they were all there. And you know what? They continue to do that to this day, which is really amazing. I have a granddaughter, and it's still happening. It's amazing how traditions continue. One day, though, that was really, really special, my dad got us up in the morning. I think it was like 6 years old, and it was before we could even get up on Christmas Day morning. And he took us outside, and it was still dark, and there was the Christmas, it was Venus, I'm guessing, and there was a star, and he wanted to show it to us. And he told us about the Star of Bethlehem and the baby Jesus and the wise men. And we were not a religious family, not particularly. But that event, it stayed with me forever. So the next thing that would be important in a baby boomer childhood is television. Of course, if we like stories, we were watching TV. Here we go, Leave It to Beaver, and Father Knows Best, and Gunsmoke, and Twilight Zone. Woo! And it's weird. All of these stories, 50s television, I actually teach in the fall a television history class because I am the living example of television history. Okay, it's the truth. And all of these in the 50s, things, it was right versus wrong. Kids obeyed their parents all the time. Nobody was ever on drugs. Nobody had suffered from alcoholism. It was just, there just weren't problems, really. It was, Gunsmoke had very dramatic shows, and Twilight Zone always proposed very deep sort of philosophical issues that would really pique your imagination. But I was sort of a product of a world like that. Oddly, years later, Tony Dow, who's the Wally on Leave It to Beaver, became one of my clients as a director. And Clyde Ware, who was one of the writers for Gunsmoke, who was one of my father's favorite writers, was actually still writing at the time I became an agent. And I contacted him, and my dad had sent letters for years to him, talking to him about some of the wonderful stories. So it was just very kind of interesting that all happened. Interestingly as well, my dad, who loved television, actually had a educational television program himself that he filmed in Salt Lake City called The Art of War in the Middle Ages. So really dull for a 10-year-old, but it was really cool as a kid seeing my dad on television. Right. So I grew up. Here are some pictures. This is me when I was in 4th grade. From when I was, 3 until I was 15, I had braces and glasses. You see the cats like glasses. And I was just lovely, okay? And my glasses still kind of do this, It was like, hi, be my friend, And then I bloomed. And I discovered boys and how to iron my hair and all of that kind of stuff. So that's me in high school, and then here I am at 35, and then here's my disco hair a few years later. Anyway, growing up in such an imaginative world, it was just natural. I loved making up stories and pretending. I was a big pretender, so theater was an obvious choice for me. And I auditioned for a play in high school, and I got into it. And then I auditioned for some more, and I got into them, and I was pretty good at it. And the next thing I knew, I had a 4-year scholarship at Utah State University in theater. And this particular picture is me in my very first college play. And interestingly, a few years later, or quite a few years later, I'm teaching out of a drama textbook, and here this picture is in the textbook as this sort of classic picture of, what can I say? Obviously, fabulous, right? So I loved the theater. I particularly loved the classics. I loved everything Shakespeare and Moliere and just whatever, right? I loved it. Here I am in Merry Wives of Windsor as Mistress Page. Here I am as Frosine in The Miser. Just loved everything in theater. I actually starred and performed professionally in more than 40 plays during that time. So During my college years, it was the 60s, and meant it was free love. And I can't live by your rules, man, okay? Do your own thing. And so lo and behold, I found myself pregnant and then married. And you know, here's the problem. Nobody told us that free love would lead to children, okay? That was the big problem. And this is actually a photo from a play I did called Talking With, which a woman delivers a dramatic monologue while giving birth. And then here's another photo. This is a play from the effect of gamma rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds. It was a play about a woman who struggles with feelings of unworthiness. She hates being a mother. She hates her life. And while I was not as terrible as this character, my life did take a very dramatic turn when I found myself pregnant and suddenly in a very disastrous marriage. Prior to that point in time, I was supposed to be going to England. I was going to be studying with Harold Pinter. You know, I had opportunities to go to New York. I had envisioned I was going to be on Broadway. This was it. I was going to be a star, and suddenly I'm married, and suddenly I have kids. And the truth is, I was devastated. And although I did love my children, I loved them ferociously, I felt trapped. I felt like my life is over. The whole point of my life is over, and it was a very, very difficult time. I got divorced at 30. The marriage was completely disastrous. I rebounded into another marriage like a year later, and that husband was horribly unfaithful and finally left me for a much younger woman and threw me into bankruptcy. And I was just completely wiped clean. I just was left with 2 children, bankrupt, a house falling down around my ears, no hope, no future. And it's interesting, I always felt like, you know, that was the absolute lowest point in my life. And yet I knew that I didn't know at that time that God had a much better plan. So after my second divorce, because I was so low and felt so horrible, I was floundering around. I didn't really have any faith. I hadn't been going to church for a really, really long time. And I got into some new age, wacky church meditation group, and we would sit around and play music, and people would see rainbows or whatever, you know. And so one day, while we were in the middle of this meditation, I suddenly popped into this green expanse of rolling green hills. And it was beautiful and vivid, and I could feel the air. I could smell how green it was, and I saw this river of birds, like white birds. And I just sort of followed them, and I followed them around a little hill, and I saw Jesus Christ sitting like on a rock in front of me. And I was startled to see him, and I said, you know, what are you doing here? Which is really probably not what you should ask the creator of the universe, but that was the only thing that came to mind. I said, what are you doing here? And he looked at me and said, I'm waiting for you to get here. And then he really looked at me. And it was in that moment, as I looked at him, I saw in his eyes such a tremendous wave of complete knowledge of everything that I was, good, bad, start to finish, everything. He knew who I really was, and he loved me deeply, profoundly, loved me. I had never seen a look like that where I felt this wave of love, and it was so powerful. I fell to the ground, and I just started weeping and crying, and I couldn't control myself. I couldn't believe it, and I wept, and I crawled over and laid at his feet and wept and wept and wept. And then I open my eyes, and here's 20 little people sitting around in a circle looking at me, going, what's going on, Peggy? What just happened? And I just was like, I can't talk about this, because I couldn't talk about it. This was a group of people that didn't even know who Jesus Christ was, much less believed in him. I didn't have any frame of reference. I didn't know where to put this information in my life yet. I knew that that really happened to me. I knew that he was real. But I still didn't know what that meant. And it took me another 10 years, actually, before I really started understanding what that encounter was going to be about. So after that, I made a decision to, I didn't have anything, so I might as well go back to my original dream, which was to act and do theater. And I actually had some friends that had moved to California and were doing pretty well. And I thought, you know what, I'll go to Los Angeles. So I literally sold everything. I started acting again. I decided to move to LA. And during that time, my relationship with my children actually improved, because now I could love them. I just had a different relationship suddenly, both with myself and with them. So we packed everything up. We got rid of everything, got it down to about 7 boxes, and put it into a Toyota Celica that didn't run very well, and came to LA in 1988. Here I am, here's one of my headshots. It was actually the most exciting thing I've ever done in my life. It was making a decision to just do it, whatever that meant. And I kind of had to have everything cleared off the boards for me to do that, and I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So I acted in commercials. I taught commercial acting for a while. I was a reader at the studios. I did all kinds of stuff. I worked all over the studios. It was a temp. And during that time, I met my husband Chauncey, who is a godly, lovely, faithful, delightful man, and we got married. And then I sort of clawed my way to the middle. I got a job at Shapiro Lichtman as an agent, first as an assistant, and then just worked my way up. I ultimately became the vice president of television at that agency. I was making really, really good money. I had Academy Award nominated winning clients and Emmy Award winning clients, and I was on top of the world. And then everything collapsed again. My oldest daughter, who by this time now was 30, calls me and says, I need to talk to you. And so I meet with her, and she says that she had hidden a secret for all these years. She had been molested by her father, my very first husband. And it just threw the whole family into a tailspin. It was like I realized their whole childhood had been a lie. I suddenly didn't know what had been the truth, what hadn't been the truth. I couldn't understand how anything like that could have even happened. Again, I had a great relationship with my father. My father was the most wonderful man in the world. It wasn't even my vocabulary to think that this could have happened to my own children. And I hated myself, and I fell into a deep depression. I felt completely responsible. The truth was, I'd been acting. It was during the time I was acting. I was gone a lot. I was gone at night a lot. And so I just wasn't around being a mother, and this is what happened. And the truth is, I felt that I had done something so terrible, that I'd ruined my children's lives, possibly my other daughters as well. We don't know for sure because she was very young. And I felt that I had done the most unforgivable thing a mother could do, was to allow her children to have something as terrible as that could happen. So it's just like all the color went out of my life. Everything that mattered money and fame and, all that stuff that mattered to me, glamorous career, yada, yada. It was like, it really didn't matter anymore. And I couldn't understand. I couldn't grasp how something this terrible could have happened. And a friend of mine wisely told me that God, and I couldn't understand why God would make this happen. And a friend told me, God didn't make this happen, but who's going to get you through it. And I just felt like, no, God is that guy that I saw one time, and he's busy running the world. He didn't have anything to do with me. And in fact, I was a Saul Paul, right? I didn't like Christians at all. I thought they were pretty much the bane of everybody's existence. I thought they were the people that were so, that caused everybody's problems. And so one day, my husband's mother was very ill. She was actually dying of cancer, and we were constantly going back and forth from my work to the hospital, and there was a storm, and my satellite dish went out to only the Christian channels. Exactly. Don't tell me God doesn't have a sense of humor. And we would come home and we would turn on and there would be somebody with blue hair and big eyelashes or something horrible like that, and crying. And I would just be like, whatever, And I really fought this for a while, and one day my husband just said, have you ever really listened to any of these people talking? And finally, one day it was just the day. There was a sermon, and it was about a God that personally wanted to know who I was, that personally wanted to have a relationship with me, that deeply, personally, profoundly loved me. And I really wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that so badly. And it was like the scales fell off my eyes at that point. And a few weeks later, I did an altar call, and it was like my life turned around. I read the Bible for the first time in my life. I read it like a novel. I didn't know you weren't supposed to read it like a novel. You know what I'm saying? I was just reading it. I watched Christian television going, this is terrible stuff. I can't believe anybody could come to the Lord with this stuff. This is really, I knew it was a miracle. And then I'm watching regular television, and I'm noticing there's no Christians on regular television. Like, the ER was really popular then, and I noticed that never did anybody in an emergency room pray. Well, that's just not realistic, right? Well, it's just not even realistic. People pray in emergency rooms. We were in a hospital all the time. There are always groups of people praying for grandma or something, right? So I suddenly went, oh my gosh. So I start my relationship with Jesus. I start meeting him in prayer, discovering him, reading the Bible. I realized that he really did love me. I realized that that person that I met that was waiting for me to get there was there for me. And best of all, I realized that he could forgive me for my unforgivable sin. And he forgave me. And he redeemed my whole family. And we survived the crisis. And then, because he is a wonderful, lavish, awesome God, he went a step further. He gave me a second chance at motherhood with my granddaughter, Jillian. My daughter, my youngest daughter and granddaughter live with us, and I have gotten to see Jillian grow up every stage of her life. Every moment that I missed going with my own children, I get to have with Jillian. And I have to tell you, this child, poor baby, she is so loved by Grandma, okay? She is loved by Grandma, okay? Wow. And what beauty for ashes that is. What a wonderful redemption. So today, well, it was a long, long, hard road. At first I thought, okay, I'm an agent. I'm an agent in Hollywood. What do I do? Okay, I mean, this is, it was like really waking up and going, oh my gosh, this is Hollywood. Yeah, And I realized I didn't know what to do. And God wanted me to stay there for a while. So I started reading Christian fiction because I was trying to figure out how do Christians actually behave, And actually, some of it was really terrible and some of it was great. And I discovered a person named Bill Myers, who is an awesome writer who merged story and God together in such a seamless way. It was powerful, and he became a client. And I signed a few other clients. And I started trying to figure out what is going on here. And Passion of the Christ had not come out yet. And I went to my bosses, everybody in my agency is Jewish, went to my bosses, I said, there's like 80 million born-again Christians in the United States. There's nothing on television. There's no movies for them. What's going on? I think there's an audience out here. And they were like, whatever, yeah, we don't care if you can make money. I mean, that was their attitude. Okay, so I started trying to figure out that landscape. Then lo and behold, somebody just out of the blue walks into my office. It turns out that they had worked at Biola. And I said, oh, Biola, and I'm thinking it's Azusa, because I lived in Santa Clarita at the time, and I'm thinking, oh, that's appropriate. Anyway, but I didn't know where it was, I didn't know. Anyway, and it turned out that Craig Detweiler, my former client, was the head of the department, the film department. So I called Craig up, I go, gee, do you need somebody to, teach a class or something every now and then? He goes, how would you like to work full time? And I was like, really? And that was the moment that I knew it was time. That was the moment where I knew God said, come help. Come help. You've got the knowledge of how Hollywood works, really, a kind of an insider knowledge. Come help Christians figure this out, navigate this. And so I came here, and it was another miracle that they let me be here. Sorry. But, I mean, I was hardly the theological, person that, they kept asking me questions. I was like, I don't really know the answer to that question because I don't know anything about that. At one point, somebody did ask me to explain the Trinity, and my answer was, can anybody explain the Trinity? So they crossed their fingers, hoped for the best, and they let me come in. They knew that I loved the Lord, and it's been a really great blessing for me. I teach classes in storytelling. I teach classes in entertainment business. I teach senior media classes. It's been 9 years, and most of you have been in those classes in this room. And then, in addition to doing that, once I left agenting, I came to start doing that. My client, Bill Myers, said, let's start a film company. And I said, I don't think I know how to do that. And he's like, great, let's do it anyway. So I was like, well, then I'm perfect, okay. So we started our company, Ameris Media, and we just really didn't have a clue what we were doing. I knew how to sell stuff. I knew what good material looked like. I knew a lot of people, but I really didn't know, anything else. So we set up a company, and we started meeting people. And very quickly, we made a film with another company, actually made the film, but it was a co-production, The Wager with Randy Travis, and we were not pleased, really. I mean, it was an okay movie. It just missed the boat on some things that we wished we would have done differently, okay? And so we sort of thought, you know what, if we want to do this the way we want to do it, because again, I was coming out of a secular past. I was like, we need to make stuff have an impact to a secular audience. We don't want to just preach to the choir. We want to reach everybody with who Jesus really is, or what the love of Christ might really feel like. And so we realized we were going to have to start trying to raise money, and we were going to need God's help to do this. So we have lots of projects in the works we've done. We have podcasts, some animation. We have a mobile app that we've done. We have a web series based on Forbidden Doors. We're now starting to shoot a web series that we are going to actually shoot at the end of April. So we're working on that now. We have a slate of 3 movies that we've been in negotiations with a group of people out of San Diego who have about $80 million to put into a slate of 3 movies. The God Hater is kind of a computer version of the Trinity, because nobody knows what that is. I'm sorry, just being funny. And then Wally McDougall, Bill's series that sold more than 2 million books, is kind of a Diary of a Wimpy Kid kind of a thing. It's a camp movie, the first movie. And then Eli is a modern kind of sci-fi alternative universe retelling of the Gospel of Matthew. So they're really cool, and they're edgy, and they're different, and we're, trying to raise money, but it takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of time to make this kind of stuff happen. And the interesting thing is, here we again at a missions conference, I'm not going to say it's easy to raise money for anything, but it's easier to raise money for wells, for clean water, and to feed hungry children than it is to convince people to put money into media. And yet media reaches an entire world. Media is a game changer in the entire world. So, what is next? Well, first of all, Biola, certainly in the film department, we want to put people who love Christ into places of influence in Hollywood. And since I've been here, we've been doing that. And it's been pretty exciting to see people in places of influence. One of our students, David Jacobson, was the producer of The Butler. Another student, Chris Hersberger, is a very high-ranking executive at Universal. And both of these guys graduated like 4 or 5 years ago. We have A-list screenwriters in Hollywood now that have graduated from Biola. We've got people in the DGA, we've got people everywhere. So our goal is to get many, many people, and that's really important. We want to encourage young artists to write, direct, and create media that lifts the culture instead of condemning it. There's plenty of people out there to write horrible stuff, to create terrible stuff. We want people to go out there and bring the truth powerfully, but lift the culture, right? And then I want to feel called to personally try to continue to create my own projects that will affect culture. Movies and games and books, and we have an internet channel that we're working on, and social media. So, as we think about media a little bit and how important it is, 20 years ago, in 1994, there was this weird commercial that came out about the internet, right? And we all had computers in 1994. We used them to type papers on and letters, and we would mail the letters, and we had heard that there was some kind of a network where maybe you could send a message from one computer to another. That was about the limit of what we thought it was. We thought that would be pretty cool if that happened. And so, anyway, this little weird commercial came out. Exactly, right? We're all sitting there going, what could that possibly mean, right? And yet how prophetic that commercial is. There'll be no more there will only be here. And when you think about it, probably somebody right now is texting China, right, in this room. We can be here and in China, Russia, anywhere, right now, everywhere, all over the world. There's no more there's only here. We're all here. We are globally now completely connected. And this has happened in only 20 years. So now, as I show you this next video, you can look at the exponential increase of what's been happening just in 20 years, and that's probably the lifespan of most of the people in this, in here. Okay. So obviously, things have changed in 20 years from a little girl jumping rope on a lake, right? You know? I mean, whoa. We've gone from typing up a letter and mailing it in the mail to 1 billion users on Facebook. And it grows exponentially, right? Media's influence continues to grow exponentially. Let's look at how media is influencing us today. 64% of Americans agree that media is an important factor in shaping moral values. Psychologists have been telling us for years that next to parents and peers, that media has the greatest impact upon shaping and molding young lives. The outlook on any morality can be changed through TV viewing. We look at the hours of media consumed. Oops. A new study by the Henry J. Kaiser family shows that Americans consume on average 75 hours per week. And then you have American adults more than 8.5 hours a day in front of screens. And that includes all screens, big and little. You have 68% of Americans agreeing that media in general is harming moral values in the US. 73% of Americans blame Hollywood for harming moral values. There are over 300 separate studies that directly link media violence to violence in society. That is more studies than the number of studies that proved lung cancer was caused by smoking. The influence of the church, which used to be all-powerful, has been usurped by film. Films and television tell us the way we conduct our lives, what is right and what is wrong. And that's George Lucas. Oh, yeah, I mean, you know. Must be true. That's some serious influence. Yes, Christianity is now perceived via social media. You know, the last video said, do you like how your brand's being perceived? Well, it depends upon what's out there. And right now, I don't know that everything out there about Christians is all that nice, right? You need to remember that everything you do as a Christian is being broadcast to a broader group of influence. We have tremendous influence today. And as we look at the kind of influence we have, you know, again, maybe you can shrug it off. Maybe you can say, well, whatever, it's a TV, it's a movie, it's a game, whatever, right? Well, here's an interesting commercial. It was a national commercial done by the Dove campaign. That was a commercial which was part of the Dove national campaign about the impact of beauty ads on children, on girls in particular. I'm really struck by this campaign. I mean, you start off with a picture of this little girl who looks a lot like my granddaughter, and she's just like, what? What? Look at what life got for me. And then this is what life's got for her, right? 8, 10 hours a day of that. All of those pictures from television, all of them from national advertising, all of them easily seen. You could even block them if you tried. You can't block every commercial, every ad that floats by on Facebook. That's what we're feeding our children. Media is an awesome thing. Don't get me wrong. There are wonderful things about media. It's a great communication device. It's wonderful what it can do. But look at the power that it has, and specifically with kids. And this is in our own culture, and again, reminding you, we export our culture now, everywhere. So what can you do? Well, before you do anything, particularly this group, stop and deepen your relationship with Christ. Deepen your relationship with Christ. Why do I say that? Because that's who we want out in the media world. That's who we want delivering new media out to people. People who love Jesus. Increase your time with him. Pray for his guidance. I did a chapel about how to fall in love with the Lord. You can find it on YouTube if you want to know how to deepen that relationship. Think in terms of creating media, and I'm talking about even your little everyday media that has eternal value instead of just that momentary, oh, I'm being so silly. Hey, I love silly. I love funny. I'm all for funny. If those of you that are my Facebook friends, and you can all be my Facebook friends. Anyway, but I post silly things constantly. I don't have any problem with that. But when you really think about it, here we have this amazing influence. Create stuff with eternal value on YouTube and Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Take a moment. Oh, that just slipped in there. Sorry. If you want to get into bigger media, apply to the film program at Biola too, and come join us. You should support God-honoring media by buying it, going to the first week a movie is out. Distributors get rid of films if they don't have good attendance the first week. It doesn't matter if the second week it was good, it's the first week. So go see Noah the first week. I don't care if it's not theologically correct, go say it. Okay? I'm just saying. And then have a conversation about it. We'll talk about that, right? Share about it on Facebook. Talk about it to your friends. Invest in it. I can't speak enough about churches. If you have churches and parents that are looking for things to invest in, and you want something that's going to have huge impact, media might just be it. There's lots of companies out there that could use people to invest in it. Us included. I have students probably sitting in this audience right now who have little Kickstarter campaigns trying to raise money for their little films and things. Kick in $5. Go to their Chick-fil-A campaigns. Even that $5 can really help. These are the media creators of tomorrow. Help them. Learn about media. Don't just see it as a game. Don't just see it, those of you that are film students know that's what you're here to do. You have been learning about media. But the rest of you are thinking, well, yeah, whatever, I've grown up with it, it's no big deal. No, learn about it. Realize its impact. Read about what's going on. Talk about it in your church. There's a whole older generation out there that's leery of it. They don't get it. They're afraid of Facebook, for crying out loud, right? Actually, gently, sweetly, take them aside. Show them how to use it. Show them how to use Instagram or Twitter or Vine or whatever. Talk about it to your friends. And that's kind of directed actually to my own film students, conveying to people who don't understand media. This is what maybe the intent of that was. This is what we can glean from that. What's less effective, in the old days, Christians boycotted and picketed films they didn't like. And actually, it drew more attention, right, to the piece than anything else. What was the film? Last Temptation of Christ. Drove up the ticket sales. The film probably would have faded, drove up the ticket sales because there was this massive boycott. The better way of dealing with it is what happened with the Da Vinci Code, where churches said, yeah, go see it, but let's have a conversation. You want to know about Jesus? Let's talk about Jesus. You want to know about Mary Magdalene? Let's talk about what ancient texts, they kind of used it as a conversation starter, a much more intelligent way of doing it. Emotional outbursts on social media are usually not well received. Again, remember that you're a Christian and your friends know you're Christian, and when you say something horrifying on social media, everybody knows it, right? Actually, a reasoned, intelligent discussion is more likely to be considered than an angry blanket statement. And then, of course, there's the avoiding all media that might be objectionable. Hollywood is slow to change, particularly things like language and violence. But the story might be really valuable. To just not go see, no, and I'm just saying no, it looks like, I happen to love big popcorn movies. I have no idea, what it's going to be like. Okay, so it's not completely correct. It's a conversation starter. But it proves that a big blockbuster movie can actually get people to come out to it, right? And And if it can do that, then people will invest more money, right? Hollywood is completely money-driven. If they think, oh, you know what? And maybe we could have even made more money if we had, counseled a little bit. Believe me, the $1 billion that the Passion of the Christ made did not go unnoticed by Hollywood. Please don't pan something because of just one thing you don't agree with. And help older people that you know to not pan things because of one thing. But I'm not saying that you should go see objectionable stuff that'll cause you to stumble or whatever. I'm just saying be intelligent about it. So what do we learn from this? Well, we hope that maybe you can get inspired. Be inspired to go out and be good media consumers, media creators. Think about what you're doing. Recognize that God can redeem anything. He redeemed me, right? He can redeem anything. And he can even redeem the very worst that Hollywood has to offer. And then determine really what God's calling you to do. Every one of you that plans to go do something in life, you're going to be using media. Unless you live, I'm not even sure that that'll count. Unless you live in a cave somewhere, but even they have cell phones. So, you will be using media. And somehow, if you use it responsibly, use it well, use it in your ministry. Recognize that you can reach people in a powerful way. Come into the 21st century. And recognize how God may be calling you to actually use media. My father changed my world by reading me stories and encouraging me in my imagination. And then Jesus changed my life by bringing me to him and showing me what real love is. And I'm now trying to use the gifts and the talents and my own calling and love of Christ to change media in the best way I know how. I just want to encourage you to do the same thing. Go out and try to use and create media in a godly way, a loving way, a life-producing, life-enhancing way. And remember who you're really actually doing this for. It's really not just about you. It's really not about just your entertainment. Think about my granddaughter. Think about these kids, or this little girl, or this baby here. Maybe your grandchildren. Think about all of these kids. So what I really want you to think about doing is aligning yourself with the greatest creator, the greatest media creator in all of the world, Jesus Christ, and go and change the world. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.